Alright, so I guess I'm live, and so I'm gonna review this movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, and I have a little discussion. So hope that you enjoy it. So this is Curtis. Curtis Walker. This is my first time actually doing this. I'm gonna do it all. Got my iPad and everything out. So hello, hello, hello. This is my personal page. So I'm gonna review this movie, Judas and the Black Messiah. I don't know if anybody's had the opportunity to check that movie out, but I found it. I guess on incident or accident, and so I watched it. And I generally, don't have time to watch a lot of things, but I watched that one, and there was another one about, let's see, social media, and I forgot the name of that one, but that one's actually pretty good too. So anyway, this I'm kind of reviewing this movie called Judas and the Black Messiah, and this is a story, quote unquote, and I will use that word, about Fred Hampton Jr. from Illinois. And so I got a chance to check out some things about Fred, and I'm gonna kind of share my screen right now, kind of do both. And so this is the actor that played in the movie. How do I say? So you can see both of us. This is the actor that played in the movie. I forgot his name. It's an African name. But anyway, so this is kind of the story. So basically, the story is about Fred Hampton, who was a member of the Black Panther Party in the late 1960s. And he was, quote unquote, assassinated, killed by the police of Chicago, State District Attorney, as well as the FBI. And the reason I'm actually doing this review, because I got to kind of put up both. And let me take that down so you can actually see this. And let me just pull myself back up so you can see me again. So when I saw that, it's been on my mind a couple of days, and it basically was the reason, his lines in there, I don't believe. And then I'm going to get later on into that about what he didn't believe. That was a part of the film that stood out to me, that he was incarcerated for basically lied, said that he had stole $71 worth of ice cream, which turned out to be about 700 something ice cream pops or whatever the case would be, and they imprisoned him. And the party obviously suffered, because their leader was in prison, and then he got out. And when he got out, he kind of gave this speech, and that was the speech that impacted me the most. And the reason I'm actually doing this again is, so I was driving at my mom's house a little while ago. I went to cover my boat, and then I went to get my mom some food. And as I was going to get my mom food, and for those that saw my timeline, you would see that I was recently racially profiled, and that's an issue in itself. But as I was driving, I saw four police cruisers and one black male standing on the side. He was driving a fairly nice car, a Camaro. I can't say the year or the case it be, and had his cell phone. He was standing there, and he was being detained and questioned, and it marked it. Just you don't really notice things because we're so off into our own life. But as I was walking by, I was like, man, there's four cruisers down there, multiple officers. There's this one black male who's about 5'6", 130 pounds, soaking wet with a towel on. He had his phone and he's outside. It's about 38 degrees, and he's being detained. But in my mind, I'm going, why do you need four, at least four? And I know it was more officers out there for this one guy. There was no arms, obviously, because they were all sitting out there and they had them they were talking. There was no firearms that I could know as I was driving by. But I'm like, why is there's this need to have this excessive force for quote unquote people of color, black, brown, however you want to identify, whatever the case with me. I always say that my name is Curtis. That's how I want you to identify me, because when I introduce people, I don't introduce them as this is Jane, my white friend, or this is Mario, my Puerto Rican friend, or whatever the case. When I introduce them, that's Mario, that's Jane, that's Bob, that's Jill. And I'll leave it at that. Of course, we have identifiers because we live in a society where identification is so readily accessible, and people have to use it because we have to always put people in a box, or whatever the case may be. You can't say we as in totality, but you understand that that's how we relate as a social group. That being said, getting back to that, so I was driving by and I saw that, and so I'm going to the Chinese restaurant, and I'm getting my food, and in my mind I'm like, I hope that everything turns out all right. So as I drive out of the Chinese restaurant, I go back to my mom's house. I notice that his car is there. Now there's two more cruisers there, but he's gone. The four cruisers that was there before, and they're out there and they're searching his car. And this had to have been about at least 35 minutes now before I came back around. And I'm saying to myself that, why is it like that? I mean, why is it like that? Why is it like that? Recently, I was pulled over. I live right here in this area, Stanleyville. There's a stop sign. There's 1, 2, 3 stop signs that I have to pass before I get to University Parkway. At the stop sign at University Parkway, I stopped. I turned. I looked. I saw. I drive a white Charger, for those that don't know, and I saw off in the distance, maybe about a quarter mile, that there was another Charger because I could see the headlights because Chargers stand out. I turned, got to the light right there by the gas station. I noticed that there was a Charger behind me. I realized that Charger is a state trooper. And so I'm at the light. I do not get pulled over at the light. I then exit, move forward off that light. I put on my left blinker. I move into the next lane because my thought is I'm going to let you pass and get on where it is that you're going because I'm just going around the corner. When I pull over into the left lane, he pulls over to the left lane, and then the lights go on. I have a camera in my car because this is the day and age that we live in. And, as he comes to my car, those you can see it's posted on my page. And I'm just like, the conversation is, do you know why I stopped you? And me being the person I am, because I know that I have a camera. I know that my car is the same car as his car. I know that my computer is reading my speed limit because I understand how Dodge made their cars. So I feel comfortable in saying, no, I don't know why you stopped me. So he goes, oh, well, you did not stop at the stop sign. And so my next statement was, no, I'm quite sure I stopped at the stop sign. And I'm pretty sure that my car camera will bear witness that I came to a full stop. Because I knew that I did, because I looked both ways. And I saw the car off in the distance. That being said, asked me for my license. Did not ask me for my registration or my insurance. Asked me for my license. I knew that he assumed that I was somebody that fit his stereotype. I knew that by the way that he approached me, and I can assume that readily. He went to his car, sat down. It's all on my camera. And then he came back and said, "Well, I'm not going to give you a ticket, so forth and so on. Just be careful and so forth." And of course, we do the pleasantries and so forth and so on. That being said, why does that? And I'm not the only one that happens to, and that happens to anybody, whatever persuasion that you may be, whatever ethnic group that you have. But the question is, why is it that some people in authoritative positions feel the need, and I think that's definitely a display of power, that you can do that and there is no repercussion. Now, granted, I happen to be of a persuasion that I'm going to minimize this because I know how things can escalate. So I have to think for you, me, and everybody in the circumstances. My idea is I got my camera on, so I feel comfortable knowing that my camera is recording the entire situation. The other part is I know that I did nothing wrong. Okay, so I work and I do my 40 hours or whatever the case may be, and I know I pay for my house, and I'm a law-abiding citizen. And so I feel comfortable standing up for myself and standing my right, but I also know that I don't want to escalate the situation. That gets us back to the 4 officers. Now, that was just me. I live right around the corner from where I was stopped. There was one officer that stopped me. He quickly realized that I wasn't who he thought I was or what he thought I was. And so then he de-escalated and said, well, just give your license and get on about your way. But I can only imagine that what if I did have the appearance and the sound, because I may be able to articulate the English language a little different than some of the other brothers out there, and I understand that. But what if I had been a different type of person? What could have possibly been the result in that stop? Because about an hour and a half ago, I did see that, and this young man appeared to be getting out, cooperating, and now he's no longer, well, I can know that he's separated from his car because I can verify that because I saw that, and I don't know whatever the case would be, but my sight is like, why is it that a certain class or group of people have to be responded to with this apparent excessive force. In that case, there was no shots, no nothing like that. But we know the history of our country and the history of the past years in the summer. And I don't want to recant that stuff because it just it saddens me to think that this stuff goes on. It saddened me that after I watched this movie, I started digging into some of the articles and the footage that's on YouTube and stuff, and it's alarming. And there was a statement in my mind earlier about Emma Lazarus. For those who don't know Emma Lazarus, I think this name right on the Statue of Liberty, because I'm from New York. And bring me your poor and huddled masses. And this is the first time in my life that I ever looked at that statement from a different viewpoint. Because I used to be, you only think about it as immigrants coming to America. But I didn't think about it that way because I realized it was just something that just clicked. And I said, I feel so bad for poor people, me included. Because there is a large majority of poor people that believe that people that are in power actually mean them good. And it struck me that statement, bring me your poor, that I don't know, it just felt like just a cry, like, give me all the poor people and just come here, a place of refuge or whatever the case may be, whatever the case. And it's just in my mind, like, I feel bad. I talk to my Mia in Venezuela every day. I talk to someone in Colombia. I talk to people in India, Honduras, and other locations, and I communicate through social media with various people in various countries. And I was talking to someone else today about something different, but the comment came about, we live in a country where we really do take it for granted to have running water. These lights right here that I have, the roof over my head, I have shoes, I have clothes. And I remember when I came to North Carolina in 2012, and what I had on and where I am today. And I am really nowhere, anywhere or anything in comparison to other people. And I don't want to compare myself to anybody, but in comparison to, like, I talked to Venezuela, sometimes no electricity, no internet, no health care, people living on the street. You see the migration of Venezuelan citizens going into other countries, from Peru to Salvador, to trying to get to America, to Colombia, and realizing that some of these people are walking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles and sleeping on the sides of the road simply because their home doesn't present the opportunities for them to have a decent life. We take it for granted just to live and be laying on a bed, or to have a cup of coffee. These are things that we take for granted as American citizens. And then you hear, and actually I will touch on that, when you hear so many people disparage this country in spite of all the things that go on in here, from slavery to the social injustices. And I don't just mean social injustice towards people of color, but also other people, because you got to remember, in the early 1900s, who was in the ghetto? It was not the black people that were in the ghetto, but it was the Irish immigrants, and it was the Italians, and it was the Jews living in the tenements, and those very same ghettos that they got out of through the passage of time. Now you find those same ghettos, quote unquote, or experiences being inhabited by people of color, and you see the progression over there. And then just this case with Fred Hampton that stands out to me is that why, and I will say this thought. So the Black Panthers in the 1960s, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and so on and so on. We know about Representative John Lewis. I didn't even know that Representative Cori Bush was a Black Panther until today. And I'm not talking about the Cori Bush, the female. I'm talking about the other Bush, as a Democratic representative. I didn't even know that he's a former member of the Black Panther Party until I started getting into it today and realizing that. But the point being is that all these people during this period of time, 1960s, 1950s, from the period of Reconstruction under Theodore Roosevelt, and then going into the 1960s and the 1970s, all these leaders were murdered. And it just, the grasp of that, because I grew up in New York and not experiencing some of the things that I experienced down here in North Carolina, to grasp that, why is it that all these people are murdered? And you have to say, I mean, you can't color that up, but literally murdered because they desire to want something for themselves and for their quote unquote people. And in Fred Hampton's case, when he's establishing the Rainbow Coalition, and then to realize that Jesse Jackson then reestablished the Rainbow Coalition after him, But this man was murdered in his sleep. When you see the movie, it's an accurate depiction of the historical event. Obviously, it's not the historical event, but then you begin to dig into the research, and you understand that you may not necessarily agree with all the things that he may have said or stand for. The point being that freedom of speech is freedom of speech, and that each man is entitled to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness in this country, and all men are created equal. Why is it that when a person of his color and his stature stands up, that he's considered, quote unquote, the number one threat in America by the FBI? How does that happen? How does that happen? How does one person become the number one threat simply because he's preaching solidarity? And though that solidarity not may be the persuasion or the identical ideology that you think it should be, is that worth murdering somebody? And then we see the things that have transpired lately. From then, Martin Luther King, Ralph Abernathy, Southern Christian Leadership, Malcolm X, even until the Minister Louis Farrakhan, who I've recently, in the past couple of years, started to look up more. And I may not necessarily agree with everything that the minister says, and I will give him his due honor as because that's who he calls himself to be, and I'm a Christian. Nevertheless, I see stuff that's happening in communities, and this is my community. And I was telling somebody today that I live in a community that's mixed. I don't want to punch anybody's face. I don't want to steal. I don't want to rob. I don't want to vandalize. I don't want to rape. I don't want to see any of that. And to hear that quote unquote statement was made in the movie, whether it's accurate or not, but that there's people, as the minister Fred Hampton said in the movie, that after Emmett Till was quote unquote murdered, that there are people in society that want to do that to you, to me, and to my brothers and sisters. At that point, I began to say, I got to watch him. And then when he was getting ready to go back to prison after his case was reversed by the, I think it was the appellate court. In the movie, the depiction was that he had told his then, at that time, girlfriend that after knowing all of that and wanting to protect somebody, that you can't even protect your own son. And I think there is a little bit of helplessness that's felt, quote unquote, by poor people of all persuasion, black, brown, yellow, whatever the case you may be, that you are defenseless in a society that controls you, which you have limited control in. That being said, trying to go off on that little spiel. I was thinking about when I see the cities being burnt down in this country. And yeah, obviously there are people that are frustrated. There are people that may do things that don't quote unquote align with the leaders of the past. And I'm one of those that believe that violence and vandalism in the name of social justice actually does more harm than good. I don't believe that we could aspire or inspire people to see your plight and to come to some type of agreement with you and to live in harmony if I'm hitting you over the head after you hit me over the head. I believe that is just vengeance. And I know that there are people that support vengeance and people that want a little payback. And that's on you. I don't believe that is the means, the method, or the process that we need to do, quote unquote, as people, especially people that desire to live in harmony and unity. Because ultimately, we have to answer, I believe, I would say, that, you have to answer to God for your actions. And I know that, that to me is the wrong way, because I'm definitely a proponent of the process is just as important as the progress. The way that you get to where you need to get to should be just as important as you is getting there. Because if you get there the wrong way and you destroy people along that path, that may not be something that you will live to be proud of. And I can say that myself. Excuse me. So anyway, I saw this article, Judas and the Black Messiah. It's a spoiler. And it basically, because I got everything going. So this is the actor's name that played Chairman Fred Hampton was Daniel Kaluuya. And so there was a part in the movie where he meets the Crowns, and the Crowns, they wanted to join together. So I'm kind of giving you a little bit of this article right here, and because I want to get to that point of what he said, because I hope that I recall and to end it that way. So anyway, this moment where the FBI was spying on the Black Panthers. Now, the statement that I was going to say, and I will say it now. So there's the Black Panther movement. There's the Rainbow Coalition, the Southern Christian Leadership Movement. We got Harriet Tubman. We got Marcus Garvey. We got W.E. Du Bois. We got what's his name? Hope Franklin that wrote what's the name of that book after slavery, before or something. I forgot the name of it. It'll come back to me before I'm over. So you have all these leaders, Nat Tucker, all down the line, considered enemies of a country that they actually live in, and whether people admit it or not, helped build, still help build the quote unquote African dollar or economic, within the sub-economic system is part of the infrastructure of America, whether people want to admit or not admit that. I'm not saying that in a bad sense or a good sense, but that's just the reality. Just as every other ethnic community is a sub-economic system within the larger economic system. So to know that all these leaders at that time, from the abolishment of slavery, Abraham Lincoln realizing that the slaves got turned out into the streets, and that because they had nowhere to go, they were considered vagrants, and when they were considered vagrants, then it became prisoners, and which is a precursor of the modern day industrial prison system. And we see that today, that whether you're labeled a vagrant or not, but in the system's desire to clean up the streets, you're labeled a vagrant, and then you're tossed off into periods of incarceration, and those periods of incarceration are definitely uneven in comparison to other people that do even less or worse. And so there's the justice system action to it, but that history comes way back from the abolishment of slavery. And what were we going to do with all these people that now had no place to go, had no money, owned no property, owned no chattel, had no education, and so they're being tossed out. And then to get them off, to bring in the Industrial Revolution, what do? You need to get rid of these people. These people are still here. And that's just a small way of saying it. That's not all of the quote-unquote dynamics of it. But when people talk about reparations, I always say, well, the Indians got reparations, right? Japan got reparations, right? There's always these deals, but how do you quantify the descendants of those people that are slaves up until now, considering all the things that have happened to that, and then also the psychological and the physical denigration that came with being the child or the descendant of a slave? And then the other side is that how do you quantify the economic empowerment that the slave and his worth and his value and his toil gave to other people, who then benefited, and those generations have benefited and benefited and benefited. At the same time, while they're benefiting, still this descendant of slave is diminishing. So there's no return on that investment. So you had all this investment by quote unquote slaves, but they had no return on that investment. How do you quantify all of those factors? And I'm just talking about just a couple. How do you quantify that and then give reparations to people? What do you give them, a state? What do you give them, $100,000 in the land? How do you do that? And then on top of that, you have the situation where the former slaves created a state in Africa, or the continent Africa, Liberia, right? And so you see that experiment and experience. So it's a very complicated issue. It's a very complicated issue. I don't necessarily know there will ever be a correct answer, but I think that if you were going to say blacks make up 12% of the population of the United States, and you can give out 1.3 trillion, and you can give out 600 billion to transgender studies in India, you can surely find a way to give $40,000 to 12% of the United States. You could surely find that if that was really what the issue was about. Somehow I don't think that is really the entire issue, but these are other discussions that we can have later on. Anyway, so getting back to the movie, Fred Hampton. So this is the review. It's off of Dinner the Geek. I'm probably bouncing around because I probably have a lot to say. And so Fred Hampton was a great orator, but he was a simple orator. And if you watch on YouTube some of the speeches and some of the historical depictions of his life and the quote-unquote movement of the Black Panther Party at that time, whether you agree with the Black Panther Party or National African, and I'm going to say it. So you have all these people that were murdered, assassinated, and spied on by the FBI. And it's something that I remarked today and for the past couple of days, and I haven't found an instance of it, but I've never found an instance where the FBI targeted the KKK and considered them to be the number one threat to American safety. Now we know the KKK is a hate group. You know, I'm gonna say it, whether people agree with it or not, and you could say that the Black Panther Party was a hate group. But if you do say that, and you consider this one to be America's number one threat, you must consider this one to be America's number one threat, because this is historical incidents and facts where people were lynched, killed, harassed, vandalized, tortured, brutalized, and so forth and so on. And then you come over here and you say the Black Panther Party, and you want to give that label. Why are all these people considered number one threats to national security and FBI's most wanted? And then not only are they considered that, but then they're systematically wiped out. This side, that did not happen to. I was looking for a systematic government movement whereby they targeted these groups that espoused this hate towards people of color and systematically assassinated them. And I was looking and looking, and I can't find that. And it might be there. I'm gonna be completely honest because I don't know everything. It might be there, but nevertheless, from a historical point of view, we know that these people were assassinated. They were systematically targeted by our own government and by our local and national police forces and agencies, and systematically, considered to be threats. Whereas this group has never received that type of attention. It was just something that I thought about, like, when I thought about, the death of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and other black leaders, some that were not on the national scale as others, and some in prison. It's just, it's sad. It's sad. And we've come along, and for those people that say we have not come along, we have come a long way. But I can tell you what, that if, this is my personal opinion, if Dr. King were here, or Malcolm, or any of those leaders during those period of time, and saw the way that we conduct ourselves collectively, not individually, but collectively, considering BLM, and people have their own depictions or weighted view perspective of how to do that in comparison to the way they approached it from their time, and just think there's a line of delineation, a marked contrast, because ultimately all people are equal, and ultimately you want to live in harmony. Some people may not espouse that view, that you can live in harmony, but I believe that God is right, and I believe that God is true, and that God says, my desire is that you may live, and that as your soul may prosper, and that you should do good unto all men. And then, of course, we talk about the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto you, or do not do unto others what you don't want do unto you. The reverse side of that. So I believe that all men are created equal in the sight of God, and that God created us all. That's why I'm a big proponent of human life and pro-life. So I think that we all have a lot to learn from each other, and the uniqueness that God has given each and every individual that has the opportunity to live. As much as you may live, you will definitely die at some point. And that brings me back to Fred Hampton, the statement, "I don't believe I'm going to die." And I listened to the speech and the meter in his tone, and as he said, "I don't believe I'm going to die," gives you the aspect that there's a person that knows that if I do this, and if I'm 100% committed to this more than likely will be the end result. That I don't believe I'm going to die by slipping on no ice. And so anyway, 1969, the speech at Olivet Church, where he makes the statement, power anywhere where there's people. There's people, and that's why I said that poor people, largely throughout history, have suffered at the hands of those that are in power, and suffer at the hands of those that have influence, that have wealth, that have riches. And the simplistic view of many poor people that have suffered is that people that are quote unquote above them, if we look systematically, have their best interest. But the reality is that generally society and history has taught us that might not necessarily be the case. That the poor generally get used and treated worse because they are so trusting. So Hampton was far from tone deaf and always had the perfect pitch. And he talked about the situation. I didn't know too much about him, but that his history and his life story. But this article is really, really good. Again, this is by Dengri. And so he tried to create this solidarity movement in 1969 with the Students for Democratic Society and the Young Lords and a former Puerto Rican street gang and a coalition of Vietnam War concerns. And they were accused of rioting at the DNC, known as the Chicago 7, and Independence for Puerto Rico. So Hampton's fiance, Deborah Johnson, who's now under a different name, says that there was nothing small or no gesture small when it came to the chairman. And one of his statements is that we're going to have to do more than talk. And I think I made that statement recently that, if it's going to be the same song and dance, then I'd rather not be a part of that dance and I'd rather not listen to that song. So we got to listen more and we're going to have to learn more. Okay. And one of his declarations always was that he was a revolutionary. And that is sort of also played out in the movie. Again, I'm using my iPad. I got my computer out. I could probably see on Facebook there might be some people that are watching, whatever the case may be. I appreciate it if you are. So yeah, I'm kind of doing both. And yeah, it says that I'm live. So it knows. I hope that you can hear me and that it works. So one of the things he said, it says he's a revolutionary. So then I like this comment that he said, if you walk through life and don't help nobody, you haven't had much of a life. And I think there is some truth in that. That we all, no one gets anywhere in life without somebody else. Today, after I was eating and I left my mom and I was walking out the door, my mom said, I love you. And she said, thank you for buying me some food. And so my comment, I was laughing. I said, Mama, you've been buying me food my whole life. And there is truth to that. You know what I mean? That our parents, and we live in a day and age of entitlement, it seems. But our parents have put up with us. They've protected us. They've sheltered us. And they've done what they thought was best for us from their perspective. And sometimes, as children, we don't always agree. We don't always get along. We don't always appreciate. Sometimes we get puffed up in our chest. But sometimes we need to remember when I was a child, I act like a child. When I was a man, I put away those foolish things. And as the prodigal son, he said, what he got all his portion. He went out and he spoiled himself and he wasted his portion. But his father was waiting for him. And he got out when he had ruined himself. And I can tell you this from my own prodigal perspective. And he said, I'm going to go home. And when he was going home, the parent could have been like, well, you messed up and so forth. So thank God that God is a God of grace and mercy. And thank God there are people around us that are gods of grace and mercy that will look past our sins and our faults and our mistakes, to look past the harm that we have done to ourselves and to others, and will still welcome us with open arms. I'm really grateful to be in the situation I am in my own life, because I know that I got the opportunity to outlive a lot of my mistakes, and I get to be surrounded by a great network of people. I'm so thankful. One, I'm thankful for having this platform to be able to discuss and to share these things, but I am so thankful for the people that are surrounding me in my life, and in my school, and the community things that I'm just absolutely honored and thrilled to be a part of. And I just pray that I fulfill my potential, because that, as they said in the movie, The Bronx Tale, there's nothing worse than wasted potential. Wasted potential, and each and every one of us has a potential that only you can reach and to maximize. And I think sometimes we diminish ourselves because of what other people think, and we begin to believe what other people think instead of believing in ourselves. And I always tell people there are two things that you need to invest in life. You need to invest in the people that are investing in you, and you need to invest in yourself. And you need to believe in yourself, and you should no longer say that I can't, but you should find out what it is that you need to do so you can. And yeah, so I'm absolutely thrilled, and I think that statement right there by Chairman Fred is really cool. And so I just like the movie depicts that his family was friendly with the Emmett Till family, and for those that don't understand the tragic death of Emmett Till in Chicago's, in Mississippi, you can read up. I mean, this is all history, and so Fred was born, quote unquote, as he says, in a bourgeois community, and he realized that there were more people that were starving than there were people that had clothes, and he just happened to be one of the few. And again, that's why I said the blessings of God and the blessings of our family, for those that have a lot of things that we do have, and we have the ability to do what other people don't. Because I always tell people this, it's a very simple statement. Life is not fair, but yet still we're still all on the same field. We're all on that field, even though others may have more opportunity, others may have more money, others may have more influence, others may have more assistance in life. That's the inequitable part of this life that we live in. But yet still, we're still all in this same field. So somehow, some way, through chance, opportunity, or circumstances, or whatever the situation may be, you still get to continue on this thing called life. And I always say life is the combination of the experiences that you encounter. That's what makes it life. And it's unfortunate that all of us aren't living in an equitable society where everything is on the even scales. But even if it were on the even scales, each and every person still has to be educated, because there was a situation in one of the videos that we're talking about creating a credit union for the people, by the people, right? And run by the people. But we live in a society where there's such a thing called the lotto. There are so many stories of people that win the lotto, get these large sums of money, and then are broke within a year or two. Why is that? The reason that that happens, and I will say it in my own personal opinion, I could be completely wrong, is that they're not educated on what to do with massive lump sums of money and how to live in a lifestyle that promotes a certain amount of equilibrium or balance, so you can maintain or sustain the money that you've encountered. Much the same that we know in poor communities, because there is the lack of education on economics, right? That you could literally give every person in this world a bank. Nevertheless, without the knowledge of how to keep your money, you'll be susceptible to those people that will come in and prey on you and take your money. And through the process of time, what you will see is the eradication of your wealth and your power and your influence and your personal assets. And now that will become somebody else's. And we know that this is a historical truth because we look at the resources that other countries have. Why is it that some countries have been developing for 160 years with the vast amount of resources that they have, and yet our country continues to move forward? Because we're educated on the economics of the world and how to continue to not only to sustain but to improve. And if you don't have the economics and you don't have the education and the common sense when you're giving these opportunities, it's easy for you to be quote unquote deceived, and for your quote unquote home to be spoiled, and the robber to come in and take what is yours and make it his, and then you'll be enslaved. And I'm using that term lightly, right, to the person that then took what was actually yours, and now you have to beg to get it back. But you will never get it back because they don't want you to have it back. And this is some of the stuff that they were talking about in the 1960s. So let's just go into a little bit of history. So I didn't know that in 1966 that Chairman Fred Hampton graduated with honors. That's not in the movie that I recall, but I didn't know, so I started getting into a little bit of background. Not only that, but he led the interracial committee at Proviso East High School. That's an interesting little pieces of information, because we know that from the time of 14, he began to embark on quote unquote being a speaker for social injustice, and he graduated with honors. He was on an interracial committee, and he changed the school's policy of nominating only white girls for homecoming queen. So at a young age, you can see that he was clearly thinking about a larger picture and thinking about how he can better not only his own situation, but the situation of those people that were subjugated to discrimination. Excuse me. He earned 3 varsity letters for running cross country and track. And though his dream was to play for the New York Yankees, Hampton enrolled as a pre-law student in Triton Junior College. Did not know any of that. I didn't know any of that. He also attended Crane Junior College a short time after it was renamed to Malcolm X College. And while attending the University of Illinois at Chicago Circle, he led the youth council of the NAACP's West Suburban chapter membership, and it swelled by 500 at that time. The impact that this young man had. Remember that he became deceased at 21 years of age. 1962, he was arrested for demonstrating for a community pool in Maywood. And one of his sayings is, "We are not metaphysicians, we're not idealists, we're dialectical materialists." So Bobby Seale and Huey Newton formed the Black Panther Party in Oakland, California, 1966. And then, had members like Stokely Carmichael, Rap Brown, Bobby Hunton, Eldridge Cleaver, and they became a Marxist revolutionary group publicized by the 10-Point Program May 15, 1967. So then Hampton was helped found the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party in 1968. I happen to be, that's a good year. So at the time, Chicago was a segregated city. Some people would say Chicago's still a segregated city. I don't necessarily believe that, but some people would say some of the things that go in there and give you pause to think at some point. And it was still recovering from the violence of 1968, the Democratic National Convention. These are some of the things that you do not know, that you don't hear in everyday speech and everyday discourse, but see some of the things that happen. So April 4th, 1968 was the assassination of who? The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who led the Chicago Freedom Movement. It's amazing all the things that were happening in and around Chicago, which protested against racist housing practices, which we still encounter for gentrification, even right here in the city of Winston-Salem. So the Chicago mayor at that time was Richard J. Dooley, and he ordered police to shoot and kill suspected arsonists. Just stuff that was going on. So as the chairman of Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party, Hampton's first order of business was to establish a community service program known as the Survival Programs, and these included the Free Breakfast for Children program. And I'm listening, and I'm reading over this, and at the same time, in my mind, I'm looking at hearing the depiction from the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. What he was doing does not add up to the depiction. To consider the number one threat to national security, but you're establishing breakfast programs, and you're creating situations where no longer African American girls be discriminated against in pageants, and you're creating chapters and medical centers like the People's Medical Center in North Lawndale, the first clinic to offer testing for sickle cell anemia, which is prevalent in the Black community. And then he also taught political education classes. This is what's being said, and that, to me, does not add up to being the number one threat to national security in the United States of America, and to be systematically hunted down and clearly murdered. His family actually won that lawsuit 12 years after the fact, because it was found that those that entered his apartment on that fateful night were clearly lying. It was a false statements by the police department, Attorney General's office. They assassinated that man. This is well known. Just going back to the historical, because the movie doesn't tell us everything. So he was known to quote Mao Zedong, "All power to the people," was not just a slogan but a calling. And when I read this article, and it's just amazing, the things that you think about. I don't see how it is. This is my own perspective. I don't see how it is that you can label this man as number one threat. And I think that I'm a balanced individual. So anyway, it's no wonder the FBI director J. Edgar Hoover, played by Martin Sheen in the movie Judas and the Black Messiah, was afraid that the rise of a Messiah that would unify and electrify the militant nationalist movement. And this is the threat, believing that the Black Panther Party was the greatest threat to national security of the country. According to Kurt Gentry's book, J. Edgar Hoover, The Man and His Secrets, formed the Bureau's counterintelligence program known as COINTELPRO, and his aim was to discredit and undermine radical groups with a particular emphasis on the Black leaders. Hampton was added to the FBI's agitator index 2 weeks before his death. And so local law enforcement also pursued him for stealing $71 worth of ice cream that they were saying allegedly gave to local children. I don't know how you lock somebody up for stealing $71 worth of ice cream. How do you justify that? Then give them a 2 to 5 year sentence? And then you think about this is 1969. This was happening. There are people literally in oh my goodness, there are people literally in Clinton, Dannemora, one of the worst prisons in New York, upstate prisons in New York. in similar situations where they have been first or second time quote unquote losers, as they say, and incarcerated for a quote unquote bag of weed and get 20 years of imprisonment. And it's justifiable because they're considered a threat to society. I don't know. I don't know. And so the statement that he said, you can kill a revolutionary, but you could never kill the revolution. And you could run a liberator like Elder Cleaver out of the country, but you can't run liberation out of the country. And so these are things that he was saying. And so they consider it to be called the massacre on Monroe, which is the raid on Hampton's apartment, later by the Panthers, and it happened about 4:45 a.m. If you see the movie, it's a very touching scene, the way it happened, and obviously, it's very sad to see that this young man was struck down in the middle of his life. And I'm gonna now do something here. I'm gonna put this thing here so you could hear, and it's going to be quiet and let you listen to this if I can get it up. I can, and I am. And I'm going to put it side by side. I'm going to put me and that up together. All right, and just let you listen to this.
Somebody might believe it, you might end up in what they call revolutionary happy hunting grounds. Say that. I'm a revolutionary. They're constantly bothering people. Anybody that's out there for the protection of the people happens to be in direct conflict with them. What makes them mad about it? What makes them mad about it is that they had black people and white poor people and red poor people and Puerto Rican poor people and Latin American poor Rican people of poor people of all descent. They had them caught up in their movements based on racism when the Black Panther Party stood up and said that we don't care what anybody says. We don't think you fight fire with fire best, we think you fight fire with water best. We're going to fight racism, not racism, but we're going to fight with solidarity. We said we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight with socialism. We stood up and said we're not going to fight reactionary kings and reactionary states attorneys like this and reactionary states attorneys like Hanrahan with any other reactions on our part. We're going to fight their reactions where all of us people are getting together and have an international proletarian revolution. Right. And that's saying all power to the people. That's saying that no matter what color you are, you're just only two classes. And that's saying there's a class over here and there's a class over there. And the reason that this class over here has never did anything to get this class off its back, because this is lower, this is upper. This is the oppressed, this is the oppressor. This is the exploited, this is the exploiter. And these people in this class have divided themselves and say, I'm black and I hate white people. I'm white and I hate black people. I'm Latin American and I hate hillbillies. I'm hillbilly and I hate Indians. So we fight amongst each other. And you've heard the testimony of pigs here. You got pigs of all colors, you know that. You got pigs that are white, you got pigs that are black, you even got pigs
So that was Fred in his speech. Why don't you live for the people? Why don't you struggle for people? Why don't you die for the people? And I just think that he's a young man. He didn't make it to 22 years old. I don't know about anybody else, but that you see that he was struck down before he even reached quote unquote his prime, and the potential of this young man, and you saw his speeches and you saw the people that were listening to him. And I look at the word solidarity. If solidarity scares people enough that you get labeled as the number one threat to national security by the leading cop in our country, it's just sad. It's very sad, and just to hear those words. When I heard those words, and then I watched the movie, and I just my review of the movie, and I would say watch it. It's a very powerful film, especially considering the things that we have seen in our own lifetime. And you always reflect back. I live basically through the benefits of those that have come before me, white, black, Jew, Gentile, however you want to say it. We're constantly learning and constantly advancing. You need to appreciate those. And I definitely appreciate the struggles of those that came before me, because they allow for me to be in the position that I can be in. They allow for people to be able to attend HBCUs. They allow for us to be able to have the economic freedom and quote unquote liberation that a percentage of people of color and minorities definitely have. I just think about that. He said these words that I don't believe I'm going to die doing this. I don't believe I'm going to die doing this, because you got to remember that his frame and his society was a little bit different than ours, where at any moment he could be accosted, literally killed, and he was. There were people that were being brutalized by police officers. Their communities were being brutalized with violence on a daily basis. That you were an endangered species if you were a black man at his time, particularly if you were a black man that was a part of the Black Panther Party, or somebody who stood out and vocalized your dissatisfaction with the quote unquote treatment of people and minorities in the United States during those periods. So for him to literally say that he doesn't believe that this and that, he gonna believe that he's gonna die what he was born for, that there have to be an indication in his own mind that this path that I've set myself on, it's going to lead to one of two things. Either we're going to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish within my lifetime, or I very well may not see it. Nevertheless, I'm on this path, and I'm not going to faint in my task and in my duty, because I believe what I'm doing is right. I believe what I'm doing is just. And I think that attitude, it should be an attitude that impacts all of our lives, the things that we do get involved in. They say, don't do it if you really don't believe in it, right? And what you believe does impact and affect your life. It does cause you to take that first step and to keep taking those steps. It gives you that intestinal fortitude to keep going. As I tell people, I say, don't tell me what you do, tell me who you are. Because if you know who you are, then what you do is going to stem from that, and you're probably going to do some amazing things. I think that was a little bit of the message that I gave to the 6th Street School when I had the opportunity to speak before them. Again, I'm honored to have the opportunities and the platform to be able to share a little bit of my life and my experience and the collection of my experiences. I continue to learn, develop, and to grow. So find out who you are. Find out what's important to you as a person and an individual. And hopefully, as you find out who you are and what's important to you, that inspires you to continue to go on and to seek and go from heights to heights and new heights, as we say, go from faith to faith.